never should have happened. And now, instead of learning from their mistakes, the superintendent of the Broward County, Florida School District is doubling down on his dreams of living in a fantasy world. He penned an op-ed for The Hill headlined, "Arming Teachers Won't End School Violence." That's true, but not arming them, or at the very least ensuring trained good men and women with guns are nearby, will continue to put kids in danger. That is a fact the liberal left just can't seem to comprehend, much less acknowledge. But the man in charge of the 6th largest school district in America, leading the education of thousands of children, shows just how ignorant he is. He also proved studying up on topics he writes about is not his forte. What does that say to the children he demands do their homework when he clearly doesn't? Look at this portion of his editorial. "All of the additional firearms in a school building would certainly pose more danger," he writes. "Accidental discharges, stolen firearms, and guns falling from holsters are a few of the foreseeable problems that may ensue." Robert Runcie, we just don't see it. We don't see accidental discharges as an often occurrence for handgun license holders or any others trained in the use of firearms. The statistics show they are statistically zero. And guns falling from holsters? What do you think happens when a gun falls from a holster, Superintendent? It doesn't fire. You have to pull the trigger to do that. In fact, unless there's something wrong with the gun or it's been modified in some extreme dangerous way, I can throw my gun against the wall and it will not go off. So stop spreading propaganda designed to scare people, because what scares me most is the prospect of another shooter in one of your schools, in any school, where the teachers aren't prepared to defend themselves and their kids. There are school districts now that are arming teachers. Some have been for years, and we have not seen any of the dangers you warn of. None. You go on to say this: "It is impossible to guarantee that responding law enforcement can distinguish between a teacher they have never met and the active shooter." You clearly haven't talked to law enforcement or trained gun owners. We know what to do when police arrive, and we don't leave anything to chance. We identify ourselves, and if we can, we already have the firearm holstered, and we certainly don't point it at a cop. Cops can also, in almost every case, tell who the good guy is and who the bad guy is because of how we react to their presence. Again, just look at statistics. We just don't see police shooting CHL holders who help stop crimes. It rarely, if ever, happens. So, Robert Runcie, I urge you to do what you tell your kids to do. Research before you write a paper. Don't make uninformed guesses. When you do that, you get it wrong, and I give you an F. Well, someone on the opposite end of the Robert Runcie spectrum is my next guest and good friend, Tim Bulot. He's the owner of Strategic Weapons Academy of Texas and a longtime law enforcement officer here in Texas. He has made it his priority to train teachers and faculty the proper way to handle a firearm in the event of a mass shooting at their school. He's still a law enforcement officer down there in Ellis County. Tim, it's great to see you.
Morning, Grant. Thanks for having us back this morning.
Oh, it's good to see you again. It's been too long. First question right out of the box. Robert Runcie, where's he coming from, Tim?
Yeah, he's grasping for the lowest hanging fruit there, that's for sure. But, you know, you pretty much touched on some of the aspects of that. And, you know, with the training that we're doing and the work we're doing with the teachers, you know, the possibilities of what he's bringing up are pretty limited. You know, as you can see here, these teachers are moving, they're handling firearms. There's a lot of safety built into the training. Like, you know, these are advanced tactics that they're executing, and you're not going to see any flagging. You don't see the fingers on the trigger when they're not engaging the target. When they're moving about, you see the weapons in a position like as they enter the room here, to where one is not flagging the other. And you know, this is their third training class, and we're getting them to a level that you would see a SWAT officer.
Yeah. And those are teachers we're looking at there that's going through some of the training that you've offered up down at your range just south of us here in Dallas. Tim, I want to ask you about this notion because the left will consistently bring up this idea that, well, if teachers have guns, cops aren't going to know who the good guy or the bad guy is. Now, you never want to leave everything to intuition, and certainly the left is never going to give intuition as a reason of why teachers would be safe in this. But there's something about when you go into a crime scene, officers end up knowing, don't they?
Well, especially on these situations. I mean, there's a profile of this shooter and what we're looking for, and it doesn't even come close to matching what a teacher would be. And the cooperation and coordination between schools and law enforcement, I mean, just over the summer months, it has increased so much, and there's constant activities going on between us and them. And, we know which schools have armed teachers in them and which ones don't. And we're doing a lot of joint training together. So there's measures in place to keep any of those things from happening.
Yeah, and the most importantly is you train teachers what to do when law enforcement arrives. Truthfully, any CHL holder needs to know what to do. If you're stopping a armed robbery at a convenience store and it's over, and the threat has been neutralized, you've got to instantly holster your weapon. You don't want to be waving it around as cops come running into the convenience store. You train people how to handle themselves when police arrive.
Absolutely. The protocol is becoming more and more standardized. The rehearsals are becoming more and more frequent. And like I said, the joint training is ongoing. And, in hand with that, we're seeing an uptick in the number of police officers that are being stationed in these schools as well, both with the local ISDs and the local police departments. There's plenty of information flow to get this back and forth, and that combined with the training that we're doing together, I don't see any of his concerns as being things that haven't been already addressed, and we're well aware of that.
I can tell you, I'm not a law enforcement officer, but a few months ago I helped stop a shoplifter in progress. He was wrestling with the undercover security guard. When I showed up by the demeanor of the shoplifter in the middle of that fight, I knew instantly who the good guy was and who the bad guy was. And the security officer was undercover. They were both the same race. I knew instantly who it was just by their demeanor.
Absolutely. And we run into good citizens with firearms on a daily basis, and we're not incurring these problems that he described, and it's built into the training. Just like you said, there's a demeanor that the citizen needs to portray in front of that officer, and it's obvious to us who's good and who's not.
All right, last question. Accidental discharges and guns falling from holsters. That's the big danger that he's worried about.
Well, some of these programs, the teachers aren't, they're not strapped in the way. A lot of times the program requires that the firearm be locked up in an easy access safety device and so forth. So they're not just carrying them out and open. They're just there in case that they're needed if the school goes into a lockdown situations. But you explained it well. All of these firearms, quality firearms, have multiple safety devices built into them, and they don't discharge unless the trigger is pressed all the way to the rear. They don't discharge upon being dropped and so forth. And the holsters, all of that is quality checked to where the holster has good retention devices in it, and the pistol just doesn't fall out on its own like this individual was describing.
I will say, as you brought it up, I'm still a big fan of on-body carry, even for teachers.
Absolutely. There's a way to do it, and it can be done safely, and it's being done right now. It's being done on an increasing level, and law enforcement and citizens both have been carrying firearms for an extended amount of time now, and we're just not seeing these incidents that the left wants to see.
All right, lastly, because I know you got to get down to the range and do some training, we saw this situation up here. We had 7 officers shot, one of them killed. Boy, you never forget. You'll go put a badge on. I don't know whether it's later today or later this week, but these guys showed up. They were serving a warrant, and out of nowhere, this guy starts picking off officers.
Another ambush style scenario. Grant, it sounds like, like I said, the after action hasn't been released yet, so we don't have all the details, but it's more and more typical that the shooter knows the police are looking for him, or they're on the way. Either he called them himself, or they're responding to a disturbance. And we are seeing more officers getting shot on warrant service, and they're prepared. Sometimes they're barricaded up and they're stronghold in there, and they're ready to fight when we get there. And it's a 2018 grant is starting to get to the point to where it's going to surpass 2016, which was a horrible year, as we talked earlier, in violence against officers. So I'm not seeing it getting better, and the political atmosphere out there, in my opinion, and I used to not say this, but now it's kind of hard to hide it. I really think that it stirs it up.
It sure does. There's no doubt in my mind that the left has been stirring some of this just all-out hatred and war against police officers. Tim, you've become a good friend of mine. You stay safe out there, and please pass the message along all the deputies under your command that we hope they stay safe as well.
Thank you, Grant. We appreciate your continued support for law enforcement and the Second Amendment as well. And I need to get you on a golf course here soon enough.
Or the range, either one, I'm up for it. Buddy, thank you.
Yeah, you take care.
All right. From a driving range to a gun range, either one is good with me, I'll tell you that much. We got one more day. What?